This is Land of Havilah, 1 Kings 11. After the glories of Israel during Solomon's earlier years, now in Solomon's older age, in one lifetime, this train wreck. Verse 1. Now King Solomon loved many foreign women, together with the daughter of Pharaoh, women of the Moabites, Ammonites, Edomites, Sidonians, and Hittites, of the nations concerning which Yahweh said to the children of Israel, You shall not go among them, neither shall they come among you, for surely they will turn away your heart after their gods. Solomon joined to these in love. Comment. It matters whom we marry, because our spouse will either encourage or discourage us in the Lord. We should marry, quote, only in the Lord, 1 Corinthians 7:39. Verse 3. He had 700 wives, princesses, and 300 concubines, and his wives turned away his heart. When Solomon was old, his wives turned away his heart after other gods, and his heart was not perfect with Yahweh his God, as the heart of David his father was. Comment. Jesus said the first and greatest commandment was to love the Lord God with all your heart, soul, and mind, Matthew 22:38. But Solomon's heart wasn't, quote, perfect with Yahweh his God, as the heart of David his father was, end quote. Meaning Solomon was coming up short on the first and greatest commandment. His heart was turned away. He inherited the blessings that resulted from David's wholeheartedness, but Solomon is forsaking Yahweh. Verse 5. For Solomon went after Ashtoreth, the goddess of the Sidonians, and after Milcom, the abomination of the Ammonites. Solomon did that which was evil in Yahweh's sight, and didn't go fully after Yahweh as David his father did. Then Solomon built a high place for Chemosh, the abomination of Moab, on the mountain that is before Jerusalem, and for Molech, the abomination of the children of Ammon. So he did for all his foreign wives, who burned incense and sacrificed to their gods. Comment. The mountain that's before Jerusalem probably refers to the Mount of Olives, after Solomon built the temple early on, 1 Kings 6:1. Now in his old age, as verse 4 said, he built places of worship for the gods and idols of surrounding nations on the mountain that's before Jerusalem. Why? Because his foreign wives influenced him. Yahweh warned about marrying foreigners, quote, You shall not make marriages with them. You shall not give your daughter to his son, nor shall you take his daughter for your son. For he will turn away your son from following me, that they may serve other gods. So Yahweh's anger would be kindled against you, and he would destroy you quickly. Deuteronomy 7:3. The problem wasn't that Solomon's women were foreigners per se, but that they worshipped other gods. Maybe Solomon thought his wives couldn't influence him because Yahweh loved him and would protect him, and because he was the wisest man in the world, that he would be too smart to let that happen. But as Nehemiah pointed out, if Solomon couldn't get away with it, the average person doesn't stand a chance. Nehemiah said that Solomon, quote, was beloved of his God, and God made him king over all Israel. Nevertheless, foreign women caused even him to sin, end quote, Nehemiah 13:26. When Nehemiah in his day saw so many Israelites with foreign wives, he, quote, contended with them and struck certain of them, and plucked off their hair, and made them swear by God, You shall not give your daughters to their sons, nor take their daughters for your sons, Nehemiah 13:25. As for Solomon, he didn't take just one or two. He had a total of 1,000, though a good number of them must have been local Israelites. But still, the sheer number of wives was a violation as well, because during Moses' time, Yahweh warned the future kings of Israel not to multiply wives to themselves, Deuteronomy 17:17. We all have to ask ourselves, what would we do if we had virtually unlimited power and resources like Solomon? Would we remain true to our God? Verse 9. Yahweh was angry with Solomon because his heart was turned away from Yahweh, the God of Israel, who had appeared to him twice and had commanded him concerning this thing, that he should not go after other gods. But he didn't keep that which Yahweh commanded. Therefore Yahweh said to Solomon, Because this is done by you, and you have not kept my covenant and my statutes which I have commanded you, I will surely tear the kingdom from you, and will give it to your servant. Nevertheless, I will not do it in your days for David your father's sake, but I will tear it out of your son's hand. However, I will not tear away all the kingdom, but I will give one tribe to your son, for David my servant's sake, and for Jerusalem's sake, which I have chosen. Comment, and thus will end the golden age of ancient Israel. Not yet, though, because Yahweh promised David with regard to Solomon, quote, my loving kindness will not depart from him as I took it from Saul, 2 Samuel 7:15. So Yahweh won't send much trouble during Solomon's lifetime. Mostly it'll be coming in the next generation. Yahweh will split the kingdom and leave Solomon's son with just the territories of Judah and Benjamin. The other 10 tribes will belong to an Israelite unrelated to the house of David. Coming up, trouble from a different quarter, verse 14. Yahweh raised up an adversary to Solomon, Hadad the Edomite. He was one of the king's offspring in Edom. Comment, Yahweh promised Solomon peace, yet here's an adversary, Hadad the Edomite. However, there's going to be no war, just rumblings of it. Coming up, an interesting narrative of why Hadad was an enemy. It's complicated, but we'll simplify it. Verse 15. For when David was in Edom, and Joab the captain of the army had gone up to bury the slain, and had struck every male in Edom, for Joab and all Israel remained there 6 months until he had cut off every male in Edom, Hadad fled, he and certain Edomites of his father's servants with him, to go into Egypt when Hadad was still a little child. They arose out of Midian and came to Paran, and they took men with them out of Paran, and they came to Egypt, to Pharaoh king of Egypt, who gave him a house and appointed him food and gave him land. Hadad found great favor in the sight of Pharaoh, so that he gave him as wife the sister of his own wife, the sister of Taphanes the queen. The sister of Taphanes bore him Genubath his son, whom Taphanes weaned in Pharaoh's house, and Genubath was in Pharaoh's house among the sons of Pharaoh. When Hadad heard in Egypt that David slept with his fathers, and that Joab the captain of the army was dead, Hadad said to Pharaoh, Let me depart, that I may go to my own country. Then Pharaoh said to him, But what have you lacked with me, that, behold, you seek to go to your own country? He answered, Nothing, however, only let me depart. Comment, Hadad was the son of the king of Edom, a foreign country to the southeast. When he was just a little child, David's army attacked Edom. In a 6-month period of time, Israel cut off, or killed, in other words, every male of Edom, except for little Hadad and a few of his father's men that protected the boy by whisking him out of the country. At some point, we don't know whether he was grown or still a child at this time, he wound up in Egypt. No doubt his royal bloodline is what brought him to Pharaoh's attention, and Pharaoh provided whatever he needed for support. Pharaoh liked him so much he gave him his sister-in-law as wife. Hadad had a child with her, and so Pharaoh's wife had a new little nephew, and she took him into the palace and raised him like one of her own. All this just illustrates that Hadad has become very well connected to power. No doubt all this time Hadad never forgot what the Israelites did to him, and he dreamed of avenging his father. So he moved back to Moab. So now Solomon has this problem festering on his southern border. It's apparent that Yahweh coordinated all these events to chastise Solomon, as it says in verse 14, quote, Yahweh raised up an adversary to Solomon, end quote. Now coming up, there's another festering situation to the northeast, another adversary rising up because Solomon deserted Yahweh. We'll read and summarize this at the end as well. Verse 23. God raised up an adversary to him, Rezon the son of Eliada, who had fled from his lord Hadadezer, king of Zobah. He gathered men to himself and became captain over a troop when David killed them of Zobah. They went to Damascus and lived there and reigned in Damascus. He was an adversary to Israel all the days of Solomon, in addition to the mischief of Hadad. He abhorred Israel and reigned over Syria. Comment, again, there's no mention of actual war, just an adversarial relationship. This other adversary, Rezon by name, was a former subject of Hadadezer, the Syrian king of Zobah, to Israel's northeast. David defeated Hadadezer 3 times, 2 Samuel 8:3, 10:8, and 10:18. Hadadezer had been a king of kings. In other words, he had many surrounding kings under his thumb, but after David defeated him 3 times, they were all under David's thumb, 2 Samuel 10:19. Thus, David didn't have to worry about Syrians for the rest of his life. He kept a garrison stationed in Damascus just to make sure everything in that direction was stable, 2 Samuel 8:6. However, over time, in this relative vacuum, Rezon left his weakened king Hadadezer in Zobah moved to Damascus, gathered men to himself, and reasserted Syrian power in the area, eventually becoming king himself. So Solomon also had this situation looming. Now coming up, another adversary, this one from within, and again there's only going to be cold war, not actual fighting during Solomon's time. But Solomon's peace of mind is eroding because of these enemies. Verse 26. Jeroboam the son of Nebat, an Ephraimite of Zereda, a servant of Solomon, whose mother's name was Zeruiah, a widow, also lifted up his hand against the king. Comment, mark the name Jeroboam. He'll be the first king of the northern 10 tribes of Israel. He was from the tribe of Ephraim, the town of Zereda. His father is deceased and mother still living. Verse 27. This was the reason why he lifted up his hand against the king. Solomon built Millo and repaired the breach of his father David's city. The man Jeroboam was a mighty man of valor, and Solomon saw the young man that he was industrious, and he put him in charge of all the labor of the house of Joseph. Comment, Jeroboam was a mighty man of valor, meaning he was talented and capable and, as it says, industrious. He was in charge of Solomon's laborers, the ones from the house of Joseph, which is Ephraim and Manasseh. From the sound of it, he was involved in building or improving the Millo, which was a defensive structure in the city of David in the old part of Jerusalem. Verse 29. At that time, when Jeroboam went out of Jerusalem, the prophet Ahijah the Shilonite found him on the way. Now Ahijah had clad himself with a new garment, and the two were alone in the field. Ahijah laid hold of the new garment that was on him and tore it in 12 pieces. Comment, Jeroboam was minding his own business, working for Solomon, causing no trouble, and doing a good job, when the prophet Ahijah approached him with a message. Ahijah tore up a new robe in 12 pieces. It's not clear whose robe. And verse 31. He said to Jeroboam, take 10 pieces, for Yahweh, the God of Israel, says. Comment, now here's the beginning of Yahweh's long message to Jeroboam through Ahijah, which is much the same message that Yahweh already gave to Solomon. Verse 31. Behold, I will tear the kingdom out of the hand of Solomon and will give 10 tribes to you. Comment, this is a stunning message. He's going to be the king of 10 tribes. Verse 32. But he shall have 1 tribe for my servant David's sake and for Jerusalem's sake, the city which I have chosen out of all the tribes of Israel. Comment, Solomon's son will have only 1 tribe, it says, and Jeroboam will have 10. However, to be technical, from the territorial standpoint, Solomon's son will have not 1 but 3 tribes, and we should take a moment to explain why. Solomon's son's territory will include the territory of Judah, plus the territory of Simeon, which by this time has been assimilated into Judah, and the territory of Benjamin, 1 Kings 12:21, which is the home of Jerusalem. That's from the territorial standpoint, the real estate standpoint. From the standpoint of populace, the populace that will comprise Judah, there will be virtually all the Judites, Simeonites, and Benjamites, plus very large numbers of Levites and priests who will defect to Judah from Israel, from all over Israel, 2 Chronicles 11:14. Plus members of every other tribe of Israel will also defect to Judah, quote, those who set their hearts to seek Yahweh, 2 Chronicles 11:16. So Judah's going to be diverse, though verse 32 refers to it as just 1 tribe. These technicalities are important because we sometimes hear the 10 northern tribes referred to as the so-called 10 lost tribes of Israel, ostensibly lost forever when the Assyrians took them into captivity. But in fact, remnants of all the tribes were preserved, for one thing because at least a few from each tribe came to Judah during the years of the divided kingdom, 2 Chronicles 11:16. Their descendants got taken away to Babylon and then returned to carry on the lines of all the tribes. So Solomon's son will still be king over all Israel in some manner of speaking. But back to the origins of the divided kingdom, why did Yahweh tear 10 tribes away from Solomon's dynasty and divide the nation? Verse 33. Because they have forsaken me and have worshipped Ashtoreth, the goddess of the Sidonians, Chemosh, the god of Moab, and Milcom, the god of the children of Ammon. They have not walked in my ways to do that which is right in my eyes, and to keep my statutes and my ordinances, as David his father did. Comment, Ahijah says, they have done all this, which implicates more than just Solomon. As the king went, so went the people. Verse 34. However, I will not take the whole kingdom out of his hand, but I will make him prince all the days of his life, for David my servant's sake, whom I chose, who kept my commandments and my statutes. Comment, Yahweh says, I'm not going to do this until Solomon passes away. Verse 35. But I will take the kingdom out of his son's hands, and will give it to you, even 10 tribes. I will give 1 tribe to his son, that David my servant may have a lamp always before me in Jerusalem, the city which I have chosen for myself to put my name there. Comment, Yahweh gave the throne to David's descendants forever, on the condition they keep the commandments, but Solomon hasn't. However, since Yahweh's patient, he won't rip the entire kingdom away from David's descendants at this point. It depends on what happens from here. Yahweh goes on speaking to Jeroboam through Ahijah, verse 37. I will take you, and you shall reign according to all that your soul desires, and shall be king over Israel. It shall be, if you will listen to all that I command you, and will walk in my ways, and do that which is right in my eyes, to keep my statutes and my commandments, as David my servant did, that I will be with you, and will build you a sure house, as I built for David, and will give Israel to you. Comment, that's a stunning promise for Jeroboam. If you listen and obey, I'll build you a sure house or dynasty as I built for David. That's a promise with some awesome potential. We should be aware that when Yahweh told Jeroboam, I will give Israel to you, he's still referring to the northern 10 tribes only, because from here on out the term Israel will refer to the northern kingdom and the term Judah to the southern kingdom. Verse 39, I will afflict the offspring of David for this, but not forever. Comment, that's the end of Yahweh's message to Jeroboam. Verse 40, therefore Solomon sought to kill Jeroboam. Comment, Solomon sought to kill Jeroboam. There's no indication Jeroboam did anything to provoke this. Being king wasn't his idea, and he hasn't done anything unfaithful to Solomon, but it didn't matter. Solomon didn't like having a rival. Solomon's wisdom has corroded. He's trying to kill Yahweh's chosen leader of the northern 10 tribes. Still in verse 40. But Jeroboam arose and fled into Egypt, to Shishak, king of Egypt, and was in Egypt until the death of Solomon. Comment, Solomon has died and passed into history. And here's the conspicuous absence of any eulogy in the text, verse 41. Now the rest of the acts of Solomon and all that he did and his wisdom, aren't they written in the book of the Acts of Solomon? Comment, in other words, in place of a eulogy, the text is directing us to other sources. If you want to know anything else about Solomon, go read this and that. Verse 42. The time that Solomon reigned in Jerusalem over all Israel was 40 years. Solomon slept with his fathers and was buried in his father David's city, and Rehoboam his son reigned in his place. Comment, also mark the name Rehoboam, son of Solomon. Rehoboam will reign over the southern kingdom. 1 Kings 12 is next. This is the map of 1 Kings 11. Solomon worshipped the gods of other nations, including the Sidonians. Sidon is here. The Ammonites, Ammon was here. And the Moabites, Moab was on the opposite side of the Dead Sea. Hadad was from Edom to the south of the Dead Sea. He went to Egypt and returned to Edom. Rezon was from the kingdom of Zobah in this area around the Euphrates, but left it and came to the city of Damascus here. The entire area to the northeast of Israel was historically Syrian and still is Syrian to the modern day. David's domination there was a temporary thing, and Rezon starting to put an end to Israelite domination of the Syrians already. Switching to the map of the tribes of Israel, Jeroboam, the coming king of the 10 tribes, was an Ephraimite. The tribe of Ephraim was here. He was from the town of Zeredah or Zarethan, estimated here, which was in the plain of the Jordan River near Succoth, 1 Kings 7:46. The kingdom of Judah here is going to include the territory of Judah here, Simeon here, and Benjamin here, including Jerusalem here. The other 10 tribes will belong to the northern kingdom of Jeroboam, which are Ephraim, Dan, Manasseh, Issachar, Zebulun, Naphtali, Asher, Gad, and Reuben. That's only 9, but Levi, which is scattered in cities throughout, would make 10. 1 Kings 12 is next.